As I mentioned, we're going to be continuing in our series in Acts, listening to Paul this morning and to some of the experiences he had. I'm not sure if you've ever been in a situation where you knew what had to be done and you had a project and you were going to do this project and you knew what had to be done to do it, but things kept coming in your way and frustrating you and seemingly roadblocks, and you become frustrated. You wonder why. Why can't this just go the way I had planned or the way I thought it should work out? And so we'll hear from Paul and some of the frustrations he had and how he was to deliver the message of Jesus to the people around him.
Did I just say that? Did I actually say I wanted to be judged by Caesar in Rome? Oh, I think I've really got myself over my head this time. Oh, what was I thinking? Well, I know what I was thinking. I was thinking that the Sanhedrin wasn't going to give me a ghost of a chance. You've heard them. They're like a bunch of church-obsessed lawyers on steroids, always wanting to win the argument and willing to even kill if they think someone, i.e. me, is leading people astray. And they don't really seem to be really seriously listening to me anyway. I can't believe how many times I've had to defend what happened that day in the temple. Nothing happened. After so many of my friends warned me that it was dangerous to go to Jerusalem, do you think I would be crazy enough to go looking for trouble by not following the temple rules? I know those rules inside and out. I was just doing my own thing there when they grabbed me and started to beat me up. I'm pretty sure they would have killed me if that Roman commander hadn't stepped in. That was 2 years ago now. Time flies when you're stuck in jail. Well, not really. I had really truly hoped I could sit down with those chief priests and elders and have kind of a friendly discussion about the changes that are going on in our religion. I mean, they thrive on religious discussions. It's all they do. I should know. Well, I don't know. Why don't they just listen to me? I know so well how it is to be driven by righteousness and rules. You get sucked into thinking that because you're educated and follow the holy writings and right to the letter, you're living a godly life, even if it means killing people who disagree with you. I still have nightmares about all the awful things I did in the name of our God. I can't believe what I did. I was so wrong. I was so misled. If Jesus hadn't shown us that God is a God of forgiveness and grace, and that we can live that way too, I don't think I would have ever been able to forgive myself. Now I see what you probably already know, that God's love and grace is for everybody and in everybody, in Jews and Gentiles, and whether you've been following for a long time or you're just a new believer. Everyone. That's what they don't get. And it makes so much sense, doesn't it? It's life-changing, isn't it? Yeah, well, that's why I risk coming here to tell them. If only they would realize that following all their laws and traditions isn't going to help them to know God. But they won't even hear me out. They just keep trying to kill me. First at the temple, and then by planning to ambush me when they called me up to the Sanhedrin. Thank goodness my nephew heard about that one and was able to get word of it to the commander. Then they moved me under guard to Caesarea, and that's where I've been ever since. I did have some interesting discussions with Governor Felix and his wife over the last 2 years. I know it's kind of boring sitting around in jail, but at least he comes and visits me. I know he initially wanted me to bribe him into letting me go, but after a while, he truly did seem interested in the life of Jesus. Who knows where that'll go? Well, I guess we have to have faith, though, that God will use it somehow. Now that Festus is governor, he's opened up the hornet's nest again. I guess the Jewish Supreme Council, you know, the Sanhedrin, they didn't forget about me, and they still want to kill me after 2 years. They tried to get Festus to move me back to Jerusalem, but I think he caught on to their schemes and told them if they want to make a case against me, then they have to come to Caesarea. Yeah, you heard how they accused me of a lot of things, but they couldn't prove anything. Festus, being the typical Roman governor, did try to do them a favor and see if I would go back to Jerusalem for a trial there. Well, that's when I got around to appealing to Caesar. What else was I supposed to do? I'm just so tired of these games. To be honest, I just want to get back on the road again. You can understand now why our Lord told me to tell his story to the Gentiles. At least they were willing to listen. The Jews in Jerusalem they're just too proud and stuck in their traditions to even consider that God might have shown us another way to know him and follow him. The only people who have really listened to me here are the Roman commanders and governors, and you guys, of course. Maybe that's why I'm here. God does use us wherever we are, I guess. Heck, I even heard that King Agrippa and his sister Bernice are in town and want to hear what I have to say. Well, trust and faith. We got to keep holding on to them. It'll all come clear someday.
Two Sundays from now, I hope to, in part, give examples that would respond to the questions that Mark was asking at the beginning. Today, I start off by asking, why am I so intrigued by the lives of Jesus and his earliest followers, and by our own Anabaptist ancestors? Why are they so important to me? I have no simple answer, but I do realize that their stories moved me since childhood. There are the steadfastness of Joseph, the boldness of Daniel, Stephen, and Paul, and the sacrifices of Jesus and Mennonite missionaries, all who demonstrated faithfulness to God. But also, there are people like Barnabas and my mother, who demonstrated gentle commitment. Through their lives, I come closer to God. They invite me to trust God implicitly. Their faithfulness to our Lord Jesus reminds me how crucial it is to keep my loyalties straight, never forgetting that Jesus is King and guide of all of my life. They teach me devotion and faithfulness to our ever-faithful God. My stories today help to illustrate more expressions of Christian faithfulness. Kyung Jung Kim, my South Korean friend, and I've quoted him before, is in a sense a product of Mennonite Christians, first of all in North Korea, then as he studied theology in a Mennonite college, and again at Conrad Grebel, and now one of the leaders in the South Korean Anabaptist movement. At least Kyung Jung, I always get his first two names mixed up, this Kyung Jung Kim, is also at this time a Mennonite World Conference Asia representative. And he writes about a surprise encounter with a fellow South Korean in Japan. Eon Hunke's Mennonite dairy farm is located in Hokkaido, Japan. Eon is a 1960s graduate of the Mennonite Vocational School in South Korea. When Mennonite Central Committee came to do relief work in Korea after the Korean War, they set up a vocational school for orphan boys, like Eon. The students learned not only trades and academic knowledge, but also faith-based values. His life was not easy, but he never failed to carry the spirit of Jesus, of which the Mennonites taught him. After graduation, he studied dairy farming and then moved to Hokkaido, Japan. In 2007, that's only 10 years ago, after many years of hard work, Eon established his Mennonite dairy farm. The farm signboard says, in memory of Mennonite Christians serving in the name of Christ at the Mennonite Vocational School in Korea, 1951 through 1971. His prayer is that his life and work might demonstrate a bit of God's kingdom. Eon's life journey took him into a foreign and even hostile land to make a new home. Reminds me a bit of Joseph, although the circumstances are somewhat different. This was very contrary to Korean mentality, for many Koreans had experienced 35 years of harsh oppression under Japanese colonial rule prior to 1945. But for Eon, reconciliation is an ongoing process. He is choosing to follow the way of Jesus, even if what might be called an enemy country. He exemplifies how transformed victims can produce fruit of the Spirit that honors God. Early exposures to Christians with Mennonite Central Committee and currently with Mennonite World Conference has led him to invite Mennonites worldwide to come to his farm in Hokkaido for service and learning together. His version of MCC's SALT program. Writer Philip Yancey, in his book, What Good is God, and that is a phenomenal book to read, shares the following stories from mainland China. For several decades after the expulsion of foreign Christians, no one knew how the Chinese church was faring, had Madame Mao succeeded in her vow to destroy Christians. As the government eased restrictions on foreign visitors, it was found that the 1950s estimate of 3 million Christians had mushroomed to about 80 million. 3 million to 80 million Christians. The current government does tolerate Chinese Christians as long as they are tightly regulated and pastors are paid by the government. But the vast majority of Christians in China meet as secret house churches led by mostly uneducated pastors, who in turn receive some guidance from 4 elderly survivors of communism that are their so-called pillars or patriarchs. Now, in 2004, Philip Yancey's translator arranged meetings with Christian leaders of the underground church. In a shabby Beijing hotel, Beijing being the capital of mainland China, each person was registered in a separate room unknown to the other interviewees. Yancey's room was checked for electronic bugs. The windows kept closed against eavesdropping, and a lookout posted in the lobby. The secrecy was meant to protect those who were being interviewed, not Philip Yancey. The interview started with an old farmer, Joshua, who had spent 6 months in prison and 4 years in a re-education camp. Joshua was secretly distributing 5,000 Bibles each year. Then entered Lao San, a younger man who was a self-educated scholar that supervised 50 leaders of house churches, many of whom were surprisingly young women. In his view, the church's primary need was biblical training for its leaders. Next was youthful-looking, agile, and witty 40-year-old Brother Shi. As a trained lawyer, he had been an ambitious leader of the Communist Youth League and had served in the Red Guard. Daily, he would cycle past a church. The large numbers of youth and young adults singing was a huge contrast to the poor attendance at his youth league meetings. Curiosity got the best of him, so one time, with head lowered, he snuck into the back seat of the meeting. The public testimonies astounded him. Eventually, he bought a Bible and read it, as he said, like a novel, from the beginning to end. Can you imagine doing that? Well, I guess for an atheist who is seeking and amazed at what he sees, that's a possibility. At the age of 27, this was 33 years prior to Yancey's interview, he became a Christian, resigned his government job, and was immediately ejected from home by his father. As an educated person, he began training leaders of the underground church. With a fictitious name, he still functions as an overseeing bishop of approximately 265,000 Christians. He is constantly on the run from the Security Bureau, daring only to visit his wife and child several times a year. Following a miraculous healing of the grandson, his father became a Christian. Then unexpectedly, they received a phone call from Alan Ewan, Pastor Alan Ewan and his wife. This patriarch had escaped the guards who were supervising his home in order to tell Philip Yancey his story. He knew about it because he'd been contacted earlier and invited, but they didn't think that would be possible because of the house arrest he was under. He was a slender, sprightly senior citizen, barely 5 feet tall. Being very deaf, he merely launched into a non-stop recitation of his faith journey. Interesting, in perfect mission school English. Mission school English, interesting phrase. And a grin, he started. I'm 90 years old, and I spent 22 years in prison. What are they going to do to me? In the days of Japanese occupation, he had helped found the house church movement. Upon communist takeover, he was convinced that no political party should be supervising the church. Subsequently, he was tortured and spent months in solitary confinement, with only memorized Bible verses and one hymn in his memory. He prayed and praised God. For a while thereafter, he was confined to Mongolia for 13 years. Despite freezing winters and only a light jacket, he miraculously never caught a cold or the flu. Rather than kill him outrightly, he was obliged to work at a noisy and dangerous job. But again, unlike many of the others who had been in this job, he never was injured. But he did lose much of his hearing. Through the years, international reporters have interviewed him and given him international renown. This, of course, has emboldened him somewhat. And as the result, he does public baptisms. The most recent one was of 453 converts. Pastor Ewan concluded this interview by saying, "We live in a time like the early apostles. Yes, Christians are persecuted here, but look at Hong Kong and Taiwan. They have prosperity, but they don't seek God." Think of it. We in China may soon be the largest Christian community in the world, and in an atheistic state that tried to stamp us out. 13 years later, I suspect that his prediction is a reality. Praise be to God.